You may already have met Margaret and Lorna in the Learning, Developing and Improving domain and the Embedded Research domain. Now they share with you how they enabled senior executive and service leaders to work differently and begin to dismantle their siloed corporate ways of thinking and working. They role model reflexivity as they talk about the vulnerability that they felt, as well as the executive and service leaders, when taking the plunge into different ways of working at systems level. At this time, they were working on a national programme for person-centred care with Brendan McCormack in an acute hospital. They give an example of how Brendan role modelled for them how they could help the leaders and staff there to overcome fear and vulnerability and step into new ways of working together. This experience with Brendan engendered confidence in Margaret and Lorna, who, on future site visits to different organisations, were able to help people begin to transform their corporate ways of working. In addition, they share how they work differently with their patient partners at national level and the delight as well as the new challenge that arose.
Margaret, Angie asked us to share a couple of examples today of critical companionship relating to strategic enabling leadership. And I was thinking about our current and past work where we were working with the siloed corporate world and how learning and development is very hierarchical and where the focus is on teaching and training and what needs to happen in order to move out of that siloed way of working. What do you remember, Margaret, examples around movement in that?
Yeah, so um, we were working with senior executives, the service leaders, the senior clinical people from across services right across the country when during that program, and that siloed approach to working was so embedded among in healthcare. And it was really amazing when we started to unpick it with people and they started to see just how siloed they were. Um, Collaborating and being part of different projects together was something that they were used to, but they really deeply embedded siloed ways of thinking. And as critical companions and facilitators for the program, that was our job, was to make them bring this to their consciousness and to raise it with them and to help them to unpick it. And I suppose one of the big themes that I remember from it, Lorna, was the sense of vulnerability that came from people. And even though they were so senior within their own organisations and within the health service as a whole, they were as fearful as anybody else about giving new ways of working a go and taking that plunge and putting their toe in the water. And that vulnerability was something that sticks with me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you had a very good example of how you were able to shift space for a particular group who were working in a major acute hospital.
Yeah, so Brendan and I were doing a particular piece of work with an acute hospital, as you say. And again, they were people who knew each other a little bit or a lot, but some had never collaborated like this before, and even it was kind of an eclectic group. So you had the general manager and the chief cook and the head of pharmacy and the head of HR and clinical senior clinical people. And it caused a bit of a conversation actually and a bit of a ripple when people saw this group who didn't normally sit together having coffee or chatting about stuff. They were seen to be doing that, and it did cause a conversation. But the program we were doing with them was for about a year, and they were very they knew what they wanted to change. They knew the piece of work that they wanted to achieve. They had a plan to do it, but about halfway through, we really came to a barrier where knowing what to do and having the will to do it was they just were vulnerable, and they just were slow to take that step and do it differently. And for Brendan and me, we had to put our heads together as critical companions and facilitators and think, how can we enable them to move past this blockage? And so we did it using a walk in nature, just getting them out of their comfort zone, doing something completely different. And that's how we were able to use that walk in nature to unpick whatever it was that was blocking them. They spoke about it afterwards, about that shift that happened, and about how it was like coming out of a cave. And much later on in the program, they would talk about it as a starting point for human flourishing that they experienced in the work that they did together.
It's a fabulous example, Margaret. And I'm thinking, as you're saying that, something had to cause that ripple. So somebody had to throw the first stone into the pond and make it safe for the ripples to not upend everybody. And I think I remember you and I, when we were planning to undertake site visits where we were going to meet with our facilitators and not observe, but take part with them in facilitating their groups. And we wanted that to work well for them. And we had to think about ourselves and how siloed we may have been in our intention in going on the site visits. And we decided that we would go to our local beach and just do a reflective walk in nature, and hence the picture behind me here of that beach. And we asked ourselves, how can we, as critical companions, be able to be authentic in supporting these facilitators when we were on site visits. That reflective walk in nature was so powerful because we came up with 6 fantastic principles for undertaking site visits that I think you and I have carried through in all of the rest of the work. It doesn't have to be about site visits. And for example, that flowing with turbulence and helping to change the landscape and recognizing the curious were 3 of the principles that we worked with.
Yeah, another one
Can
I
you remember
remember.
that?
Yeah, I remember the recognizing the curious one is one that really sticks out, and another one was cherish the fertility, so that no matter
Yeah.
where you go and who you're working with, there is a fertile soil there that will grow whatever is right for that place. If you just cherish it and don't try to disrupt it, it'll work for that place. Yeah, I still remember
Yeah.
those principles, Lorna. And I still remember how we got ourselves to think differently and to really examine the way that we were working with all of these people. And that has stuck with me now in the National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate as we try to work differently with patient partners and bringing all that learning as critical companion to the work that we're doing and trying to engage differently with our patient partners. It's really starting to show some great benefits, little things. We have a symposium coming up. We hold one twice a year, quality and patient safety. And we would always have patient partner involvement in it. But this year they want to have a section for themselves that they will shape and they will run in their way. They see it as a standing item on the symposium from here on. We have to think about that a little bit. I say we as in the corporate management team that are organising it, because it's pushing us, again, it's pushing us out of our siloed way of working, and it makes us a little bit vulnerable. So we have to think about it, but using the principles of critical companionship and being creative in the way that we adopt them, yeah, it's making us do things differently.
And so the co-learning continues, Margaret.
It
But
does,
I think we
Lorna.
can leave it at that. We can leave it at that, Margaret. I hope these examples are useful.
Thanks, Lorna.
Thank you.